Tyler wiped sweat from his face as he crawled through another tight maintenance tunnel deep inside Terminus 7. The massive space station stretched for miles in every direction, a giant hub where alien species from across the galaxy came to trade and do business. Tyler had been working here for almost 3 years now, fixing broken equipment and cleaning out old sections that nobody else wanted to deal with. It wasn't the kind of job that made you famous, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it let him send money back home to his mom and younger brother in Colorado. Today felt different though. The work order on his tablet was sending him down to sublevel 94, a part of the station he'd never even heard of before. According to the notes, some kind of atmospheric regulator was malfunctioning down there and triggering alarms throughout the entire station. Tyler gathered his tools, double-checked his oxygen monitor just in case, and started the long trip down. The elevators took him deeper and deeper into the station's core. With each level, the corridors got older and darker. The walls changed from smooth modern metal to rough stone covered in weird symbols that glowed with a faint blue light. Tyler had heard stories about this section from other maintenance workers. Apparently, this part of Terminus 7 was built thousands of years ago by some ancient alien empire called the Vorthani, long before humans had even invented cars. Most aliens avoided these old sections, treating them like haunted houses or sacred temples. But Tyler didn't believe in ghost stories. A broken regulator was a broken regulator, no matter how old the building was. He passed through several security checkpoints where nervous-looking alien guards waved him through after checking his credentials. They all gave him the same strange look, like they couldn't believe someone was actually going down there. Tyler just shrugged and kept walking. He'd learned early on that working in space meant dealing with all kinds of superstitious nonsense from different species. Humans tended to be more practical about these things. Finally, after what felt like an hour of walking through increasingly dusty corridors, Tyler reached the location marked on his work order. He stopped dead in his tracks. In front of him stood a door that had to be at least 20 feet tall, maybe more. It was covered from top to bottom in intricate carvings and symbols that seemed to shift and move in the dim light. The thing looked like it belonged in a museum, not on a working space station. Next to this massive door, looking tiny by comparison, was the atmospheric regulator he was supposed to fix. It was beeping and flashing error codes like crazy. Tyler set down his toolkit and got to work. The regulator was ancient, using technology he'd never seen in any manual, but the basic principles were the same as modern equipment. Air goes in, gets filtered and pressurized, then distributed throughout the system. He started disconnecting panels and checking connections, trying to figure out what was causing the malfunction. As he worked, clouds of dust filled the air. The place hadn't been disturbed in years, maybe decades. Tyler's nose started to itch. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the wiring in front of him, but the tickling sensation got stronger and stronger. He knew he should probably put on a filter mask, but they were all the way at the bottom of his toolkit. The itch became unbearable. Tyler let out a huge sneeze. The sound echoed through the empty corridor like a thunderclap. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and muttered an apology to nobody in particular. For a few seconds nothing happened. Tyler turned back to the regulator, reaching for his screwdriver. Then the door started to glow. The symbols carved into its surface lit up one by one, spreading across the entire massive door like a chain reaction. Tyler dropped his screwdriver and stumbled backward, his heart suddenly pounding. The door began to shake, making a deep rumbling sound that he could feel in his chest. And then a voice spoke. It was deep and powerful, seeming to come from everywhere at once. But what really freaked Tyler out was that the voice spoke in perfect English. The heir has returned. The massive door began to slide open with a sound like distant thunder. Golden light poured out from inside, so bright that Tyler had to shield his eyes. As his vision adjusted, he could see into a huge chamber. In the center floated a crystal box, surrounded by dozens of glowing orbs that pulsed with light. The whole scene looked like something out of a science fiction movie, except it was real and happening right in front of him. Tyler's mind raced. This had to be a mistake. He was just a maintenance guy. He'd sneezed on an old door and somehow that had triggered it to open. But doors didn't just open from sneezes, especially not doors that had been sealed for thousands of years. And that voice had called him an heir. An heir to what? Before he could process any of this, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights began flashing in the corridor behind him. Tyler knew what that meant. Security would be here any minute. He should run, get as far away from this place as possible before someone blamed him for breaking into an ancient tomb or whatever this was. But his feet wouldn't move. He just stood there staring into the golden light. The voice spoke again, softer this time, almost gentle. Welcome home, child of the ancient bloodline. The Empire has waited so long for your return. Tyler finally found his voice. Look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm just here to fix the air system. I'm human. I'm from Earth. I don't know anything about any empire or bloodline. The glowing orbs inside the tomb seemed to pulse brighter, like they were responding to his words. Tyler heard footsteps approaching fast, along with the clicking sound of weapons being readied. He turned to see a group of heavily armed alien soldiers rushing down the corridor toward him. They were Krell, a reptilian species known for working as security across the galaxy. Behind them came a tall, elegant alien wearing fancy robes and moving with an air of authority. Tyler instinctively raised his hands. Hey, I didn't break anything. I was just fixing the regulator like I was supposed to, and I sneezed and the door opened on its own. I didn't touch it, I swear. The robed alien pushed past the soldiers, all four of its eyes wide with shock. When it spoke, its voice trembled with emotion. This is impossible. Absolutely impossible. This tomb has been sealed for 3,000 years. Only someone of pure royal blood can open it. Only a direct descendant of Empress Shilvora herself could break these seals. The alien looked back and forth between Tyler and the open tomb, clearly struggling to understand what it was seeing. But you are human. Your species has only been in space for a few generations. This should not be possible. It violates everything we know about Vorthani genetic locks and security systems. Tyler couldn't argue with that assessment. He agreed completely. None of this made any sense. But the door was standing wide open, glowing with golden light. The voice had called him an heir and talked about bloodlines. And his simple repair job had just turned into the weirdest day of his entire life. He had a feeling things were about to get a lot more complicated. The tall alien in the fancy robes stepped closer to Tyler, moving slowly like someone approaching a wild animal. He introduced himself as Veldar, a historian who had spent his entire life studying the ancient Vorthani civilization. The Krell soldiers kept their weapons pointed in Tyler's general direction, but Veldar seemed more curious than threatening. His four eyes studied Tyler with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. I need to scan you, Veldar said, pulling out a device that looked like someone had crossed a smartphone with a medical scanner. With your permission, of course. We must understand how you managed to open the tomb of Empress Shilvora. This door has defeated every Vorthani noble who has attempted to open it for the last 3 millennia. Tyler nodded, still trying to wrap his head around everything. Yeah, sure, scan away. But I'm telling you, I just sneezed. That's literally all I did. I didn't hack anything or use some secret code. My nose itched and I sneezed. Veldar ran the scanner over Tyler's body, his eyes fixed on the small screen. As data started coming through, his expression changed from curiosity to complete shock. He ran the scan again, then a third time, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Finally, he looked up at Tyler with something that looked like awe mixed with confusion. This is remarkable. Unprecedented. You have Vorthani genetic markers in your DNA. They are woven into your human genes in a pattern I have never encountered in all my years of research. It is as if someone deliberately combined both species at the molecular level, creating something entirely new. Tyler felt his stomach drop. That's insane. I'm from Colorado. My dad left when I was young and my mom raised me and my brother on a teacher's salary. We're just regular people. There's no way I have alien DNA. Someone would have noticed before now, right? But even as he said it, Tyler started remembering things. Strange things he'd always written off as good luck or natural talent. He'd never been sick, not even once in his entire life. While other kids caught colds and flu every winter, Tyler never even got a sniffle. His reflexes were quick too, quick enough that he'd been offered athletic scholarships in high school despite not being particularly interested in sports. And he healed fast. That time he'd cut his hand pretty badly in the workshop, it had been completely healed within 2 days. The doctor had called it remarkable. Tyler had just figured he was lucky. Word about the tomb opening spread through Terminus 7 faster than a computer virus. Within a few hours, ships started arriving from all over the sector. Representatives from different Vorthani noble houses came rushing to the station, each with their own agenda. Some brought gifts and spoke in flowery language about honor and destiny, offering Tyler wealth and titles. Others came with barely concealed hostility, clearly viewing him as either a fraud or a threat to their own claims of noble blood. The station commander, a no-nonsense alien named Corvier, made the call to put Tyler in protective custody. She explained it was for his safety, but Tyler understood what that really meant. He was a problem now, a political complication that could spark conflicts between powerful alien houses. Corvier needed to keep him contained until she figured out what to do with him. They moved Tyler to a suite in the diplomatic section of the station. It was the nicest room he'd ever seen in his life. Huge windows looked out at the stars, and the furniture probably cost more than his mom made in 5 years of teaching. But nice or not, it was still a prison. Guards stood outside his door, and when Tyler tried to leave, they politely but firmly told him he needed to stay put. Veldar visited him that evening, bringing food and information. The historian sat down across from Tyler and explained how Vorthani society worked. Everything was about bloodline and ancestry. Your family name determined your place in their world. The Empress's tomb had been sealed with a genetic lock, programmed to only open for someone who shared her DNA. For 3,000 years, Vorthani nobles had tried everything to open that door. They'd used technology, performed rituals, even tried to hack the genetic locks with advanced science. Every single attempt had failed. You must understand the significance of what has happened, Veldar said, his voice serious. According to ancient Vorthani law, the rightful heir to Empress Shulvora's throne has the authority to claim leadership over all Vorthani territories. There are 7 major noble houses and dozens of minor ones, all constantly competing for power and influence. They have been fighting amongst themselves for millennia. But if you can prove your claim as the Empress's heir, you could theoretically unite them all under your authority. Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've got to be kidding me. I don't want to rule anything. I barely managed to keep my own life organized. I just want to fix equipment, send money home, and maybe save up enough to eventually go back to Earth. Can't we just close the door and pretend this never happened? Veldar shook his head slowly. I am afraid it is not that simple. The tomb has chosen you. Inside that chamber is more than just treasure or ancient weapons. The Empress left a message specifically for her heir, knowledge that has been sealed away for thousands of years. If you refuse to enter and hear that message, the tomb will seal itself forever. Whatever warning or gift Empress Shulvora left behind will be lost to history. Tyler spent the whole night lying awake, staring at the ceiling of his fancy prison cell. His mind kept going in circles. On one hand, none of this was his fault. He'd just been doing his job. It wasn't fair that his whole life was being turned upside down because of something his ancestors might have done thousands of years ago. On the other hand, what if the Empress's message was actually important? What if there was something in that tomb that people needed to know? By morning, Tyler had made his decision. He told Corvier and Veldar that he would enter the tomb and hear whatever message the Empress had left. But he had conditions. Veldar had to come with him as a witness. Tyler didn't trust the Vorthani nobles who kept sending him messages that alternated between flowery compliments and thinly veiled threats. But Veldar seemed like he actually cared about the truth more than politics or power. They returned to Sublevel 94 with an armed escort. The tomb still stood open, its golden light unchanged from the day before. Tyler took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves, and stepped inside. Veldar followed close behind, his scanner recording everything. As they approached the crystal container in the center of the chamber, it began to pulse with light. Then, instead of opening to reveal a body like Tyler expected, it projected a hologram. A tall Vorthani woman appeared before them, wearing robes that seemed to shimmer with captured starlight. She was clearly alien, with features that no human would have, but something about her face caught Tyler's attention. The shape of her eyes, the way her jaw was set, even the slight tilt of her head, they all reminded him of his own years to tell you the truth about who you are and why you exist. The hologram of Empress Shulvora stood before Tyler, looking as real as any living person. Her presence filled the chamber with an energy that made the air feel heavy. Tyler found himself holding his breath as she began to speak, and with every word, everything he thought he knew about history started to crumble. 3,000 years ago, the Empress said, her voice carrying the weight of ages, the Vorthani Empire stood at the peak of its power. We had conquered the challenges of space travel and pushed even further. Our scientists had developed technology that allowed us not just to travel between stars, but to move through time itself. We could visit the past, observe the future, and explore possibilities that other civilizations could barely imagine. The hologram shifted, and images began to appear around them. Tyler saw massive ships unlike anything he'd ever seen, cities that floated in space, and technology that seemed like pure magic. The Vorthani Empire had been something extraordinary, far beyond what modern civilizations had achieved. I led an expedition, Shulvora continued, to explore distant galaxies and seek out new forms of life. We wanted to understand how different species evolved, how they thought, how they survived. And then we found your world. The images changed, showing a planet Tyler recognized immediately. But not the Earth he knew. This was Earth thousands of years in the past, when humans were still primitive, just beginning to form the first cities and civilizations. Tyler watched as Vorthani ships observed from orbit, studying the humans below like scientists studying insects. "Your people fascinated me," the Empress said, her expression growing thoughtful. "You were so young as a species, so fragile and vulnerable. Disease killed you easily. You had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. By all logic you should have gone extinct long ago. But you didn't. Instead you thrived. You adapted to every environment, survived every disaster, and kept pushing forward no matter what obstacles you faced." Tyler watched the images showing ancient humans dealing with ice ages, droughts, predators, and countless other threats. They should have died out, but they didn't. They learned, adapted, and survived through sheer determination. "The Vorthani had become powerful," Shovora said, and now her voice carried sadness. "But in becoming powerful, we had lost something essential. We had grown rigid in our thinking, set in our ways. We believed we had all the answers. We stopped adapting because we thought we no longer needed to. But you humans, you were the opposite. You had nothing except your ability to change, to learn, to try new approaches when old ones failed." The hologram turned to look directly at Tyler. "I believed that the future of intelligent life in this galaxy required something new. Not Vorthani superiority or human determination alone, but a combination of both. Knowledge and adaptability working together." Tyler felt a chill run down his spine. He had a feeling he knew where this was going and he didn't like it. "I made a decision," the Empress said, "that my council called heresy. I took my own genetic material and integrated it into a small population of humans on your world. I created a bloodline that would carry Vorthani traits through your natural evolution. The changes were subtle, designed to remain dormant for thousands of years. Better immune systems, faster reflexes, enhanced problem-solving abilities. Nothing that would make you obviously different, but enough to give you advantages." Tyler's hands clenched into fists. "You experimented on humans? You changed our DNA without asking, without permission? Those were people, not lab rats." The hologram seemed to acknowledge his anger. "Yes. I knew you would be angry, and that anger proves my point. A pure Vorthani would justify my actions as necessary for the greater good. But you, with your human heart, see the moral problem. You understand that what I did was wrong even if my intentions were good. That perspective, that ability to question authority and challenge accepted truths, is exactly what I hope to preserve." Veldar, standing beside Tyler, made a sound of realization. "The Council discovered what you had done. That is what started the Civil War. The Great Schism that destroyed the Empire." The hologram nodded solemnly. "My people could not accept what I had done. The Vorthani have always prided themselves on genetic purity. The idea of mixing our DNA with what they considered a primitive species was unthinkable. When the Council learned the truth, they declared me a traitor. Noble houses that had been allies for centuries turned on each other. Brother fought brother. Families were torn apart. The empire I had spent my life building began to destroy itself from within." The images around them showed the horror of the Civil War. Massive ships battling in space, cities burning, entire planets being devastated by weapons that should never have been used. Tyler watched in sick fascination as the mighty Vorthani Empire tore itself apart. "Rather than watch everything burn," Shovora said, "I made a choice. I sealed myself in this tomb with a genetic lock keyed specifically to my human descendants. I knew it would take thousands of years for humanity to develop space travel and spread out into the galaxy. But I was patient. I was willing to wait for one of my descendants to find this place and hear my message." The hologram gestured around the chamber. "I left 3 things for you, Tyler. First, complete genetic data that proves your lineage beyond any possible doubt. No Vorthani house can dispute your claim with this evidence. Second, access codes to technology caches I hid throughout the galaxy before sealing myself here. Advanced ships, weapons, and knowledge that will give you power if you choose to claim your inheritance." Tyler wanted to interrupt, to say he didn't want any of this, but something in the Empress's expression stopped him. "Third and most important," Shovora said, her voice growing urgent, "I leave you a warning. The Empire did not fall only because of civil war. That was merely the final blow to a civilization already weakened by something else. Something far worse." The images changed again, showing something that made Tyler's blood run cold. Empty space where star systems should have been. Recordings of desperate distress calls that ended in static. An expanding darkness that seemed to swallow everything it touched. "We detected an anomaly at the edge of known space," the Empress explained. "A force unlike anything we had encountered before. We called them the Devourers because that is what they did. They consumed entire civilizations completely. Planets, people, technology, even the stars themselves. They left nothing behind. No ruins, no survivors, no evidence that life had ever existed in those regions. Tyler stared at the images, feeling sick. What were they? Where did they come from? We never learned the answers, Shalvora admitted. I tried to unite the Vorthani to face this threat. I warned the Council that we needed to prepare, to work together, to set aside our differences. But they were too proud, too convinced of their own superiority. They believed no enemy could challenge Vorthani technology and military might. They were wrong. The images showed the Devourers advancing, and the Vorthani Empire crumbling before them. It wasn't a war. It was an extermination. The Devourers consumed us, the Empress said quietly. By the time we understood what we were facing, it was too late. The Empire fell. Our civilization was scattered. And the Devourers, having consumed everything in this region of space, went dormant. She looked at Tyler with an expression of desperate hope. But they are not gone. My final calculations, done in the last days before I sealed this tomb, suggested they were only sleeping. And I projected when they would awaken again. Tyler felt his mouth go dry. When? Soon, Shalvora said. Within your lifetime. The Devourers are beginning to stir once more. I have given you the tools to do what I could not, Tyler. Unite the species of this galaxy. Combine human adaptability with Vorthani knowledge. Prepare for what is coming. You are the bridge I created, the heir of two worlds. The question is, will you accept this burden? The hologram began to flicker. The choice is yours. But choose quickly. Time is running out, and the galaxy is not ready for what is coming. The light vanished, leaving Tyler and Veldar standing in sudden darkness. Tyler's mind was reeling, trying to process everything he'd just learned. Before either of them could speak, the entire station shook violently. Alarms began screaming throughout sublevel 94. They ran to the tomb entrance and looked out to see chaos. Armed soldiers in blood-red armor were storming through the corridors, shooting anyone who got in their way. Veldar grabbed Tyler's arm, his face pale with fear. House Kratar, the historian said. One of the most powerful Vorthani noble families. They have decided to take you by force. Plasma bolts screamed past Tyler's head as he and Veldar ducked back into the tomb. The air crackled with energy as the weapon's fire tore chunks out of the ancient stone walls. House Kratar had launched a full military assault on Terminus 7, and they weren't being subtle about it. Their soldiers moved through the corridors like a well-oiled machine, overwhelming the surprise station security forces through sheer numbers and firepower. Veldar grabbed Tyler's sleeve and pulled him toward a side passage. The historian knew these old sections better than anyone, having spent years exploring and documenting them. They ran through narrow maintenance tunnels that Tyler recognized from his work. He'd crawled through these same passages dozens of times while fixing broken equipment, never imagining he'd be running for his life through them. Behind them, they could hear the Kratar soldiers shouting orders in the Vorthani language. The soldiers were searching the tomb systematically, clearly looking for Tyler. Heavy boots echoed off stone walls as more troops poured into the area. Tyler's heart hammered in his chest as he ran, his work boots slipping on the dusty floor. They emerged into a service bay 3 levels up from the tomb. Tyler was about to suggest they head for the main concourse where there would be more people and hopefully more security, but plasma fire erupted from their left before he could speak. A full squad of red-armored soldiers had been waiting for them, cutting off their escape route. Veldar reacted faster than Tyler would have thought possible for an old historian. He shoved Tyler hard to the right just as a plasma bolt seared through the space where Tyler's chest had been a split second before. But Veldar wasn't fast enough to save himself. The next shot caught him square in the shoulder, and the historian cried out in pain as he fell. Tyler dragged Veldar behind a stack of cargo containers as more shots tore through the air around them. The smell of burning metal and ozone filled Tyler's nose. He ripped off his work shirt and pressed it against Veldar's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The historian's face had gone pale, and his breathing came in short, ragged gasps. "Go," Veldar managed to say through clenched teeth. "You are more important. The galaxy needs you. Leave me." "Shut up," Tyler snapped, pressing harder on the wound. "Nobody's dying today if I can help it." But they were trapped. The soldiers had them pinned down and more were arriving every minute. Tyler could hear them coordinating their movements, slowly surrounding the cargo containers. It was only a matter of time before they moved in for the capture. Tyler looked around desperately for anything that might help them. A weapon, an escape route, anything at all. His eyes landed on an old wall panel marked with Vorthani symbols. It was an access port to the station's original systems, the kind he'd worked with dozens of times during repairs. Normally these panels just controlled basic functions like lighting and air circulation in the old sections. But the Empress had said she'd left him access codes. She'd said the information would be there when he needed it. Tyler didn't understand how it was possible, but suddenly he knew things he definitely hadn't known 5 minutes ago. Command sequences scrolled through his mind like he'd memorized them years ago. His hands moved to the panel almost on their own, entering a complex series of commands that he shouldn't have known existed. The panel lit up with golden light, the same color as the tomb. Information flooded into Tyler's consciousness, overwhelming at first but quickly organizing itself into something he could understand. He could suddenly see the entire layout of Sublevel 94 in his mind. Every corridor, every system, every piece of ancient Vorthani technology that still lay dormant in the walls. And he understood how to control all of it. Tyler's fingers flew across the interface. Throughout the old sections, systems that hadn't activated in centuries suddenly came to life. Hidden panels slid open in the walls, revealing automated defense turrets that had been waiting in standby mode for thousands of years. Security barriers dropped from the ceiling, sealing off corridors and trapping groups of soldiers in isolated sections. Environmental controls shifted, making some areas too hot or too cold for the soldiers to operate effectively. The Kratar soldiers found themselves facing a level of resistance they hadn't anticipated. Automated systems responded to Tyler's commands, creating obstacles and barriers at every turn. But Tyler was careful. He didn't activate any lethal defenses. He trapped soldiers in sealed corridors but made sure they had air and light. He used stun fields instead of weapons. He blocked their advance without killing anyone. Commander Corvier's voice crackled over the station's communication system. She'd been coordinating the defense from the command center, and she sounded both surprised and impressed. Whoever just activated the old Vorthani systems, thank you. Station security is regaining control of the affected sections. Tyler helped Veldar to his feet, supporting the injured historian's weight. They needed to get to the medical bay, but first Tyler had something to say. He activated the public address system, making sure his voice would carry throughout the entire station. Lord Kratar, Tyler said, speaking clearly despite his racing heart. Your soldiers are trapped but unharmed. I could have killed them all. The old defense systems are more than capable of it. But I didn't because that's not who I am. That's the difference between us. He switched to speaking in Vorthani, the language flowing from him naturally even though he'd never studied it. The genetic knowledge the Empress had left him included not just technical information but cultural understanding as well. I didn't ask for any of this. I don't want your empire or your politics or your wars. I was a maintenance worker just trying to do my job and help my family. But the Empress left me a warning about something that threatens all of us. Every species, every world, everything. And you're all too busy fighting each other to listen. His words echoed through the corridors and carried to every section of the station. In the diplomatic quarters, representatives from various Vorthani houses who had come to negotiate or threaten stopped what they were doing to listen. In ships docked at the station's ports, captains and crews heard the transmission. Word spread quickly through communication networks to other stations and planets. The Empress didn't choose a pure Vorthani heir, Tyler continued, his voice gaining strength. She chose to create someone who was both human and Vorthani because she knew that's what the galaxy would need. I have your knowledge now, your technology, your history. But I also have human stubbornness. I don't give up just because something seems impossible. And I'm telling you right now, there's something out there that's worse than any political disagreement. The Devourers are real and they're coming back. There was a long moment of silence. Then Lord Kratar's voice came through the speakers, dripping with barely controlled rage. You dare lecture me, human? You who have stolen what belongs to the Vorthani by right of blood. This is not over. Release my soldiers, or I will reduce this station to debris. Commander Corvier cut in before Tyler could respond. Her voice was ice-cold and absolutely serious. Lord Kratar, you have committed an act of war against a neutral station. You have violated a dozen galactic treaties. Stand down immediately and withdraw your forces, or I will authorize a military response. Additionally, I will report your actions to the Galactic Council. Your house will face sanctions, trade restrictions, and possible expulsion from the commerce networks. Is that really what you want? The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Tyler held his breath, wondering if Kratar would actually back down or if this situation was about to get even worse. Veldar leaned heavily against him, the historian's breathing ragged but steady. The old alien managed a weak smile. Well done, heir of two worlds, Veldar whispered. You had the power to destroy them, but you chose restraint. That is not the Vorthani way. Perhaps it should be. Finally, Lord Kratar's response came through. Very well. But know this, human. The Vorthani will never accept a mongrel as their leader. You may have one today, but this is far from over. Tyler released the security barriers, allowing the trapped soldiers to withdraw. They filed out of the old sections, some looking relieved, others shooting hostile glares in the direction of the tomb. Within an hour, the last of Kratar's forces had left the station. Tyler got Veldar to the medical bay where alien doctors immediately began treating his plasma burn. As they worked, Tyler sat down heavily in a waiting area chair, exhaustion washing over him. The genetic knowledge flooding his mind was incredible but overwhelming. He understood technology he'd never studied, spoke languages he'd never learned, and could access systems he'd never even known existed. But he was still Tyler. Still the kid from Colorado who'd grown up without a father and learned to fix things because his family couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. The Vorthani knowledge hadn't changed that fundamental part of who he was. Retried. 3 days after the attack, Tyler found himself sitting in the largest conference room on Terminus 7, surrounded by more powerful people than he'd ever imagined meeting in his entire life. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the chamber, along with leaders from all 7 major Vorthani noble houses. Some attended in person, while others appeared as holograms projected from their home worlds light years away. The air was thick with tension and the smell of different alien atmospheres mixing together. The genetic data from the Empress's tomb had been analyzed by scientists from 5 different civilizations, all working independently to verify the results. There was no question anymore, no room for doubt. Tyler carried Empress Sholvora's genetic markers in his DNA. By the ancient laws that the Vorthani still followed, that made him a legitimate heir to imperial authority. But what that actually meant in practical terms was still up for debate, and the debate had been going on for hours. Tyler had spent the last 3 days trying to learn how to control the flood of Vorthani knowledge in his head. Veldar, recovering from his plasma burn in the medical wing, had explained that the genetic encoding was designed to activate gradually. The information was supposed to come to him piece by piece, preventing his mind from being overwhelmed all at once. But it was still strange and disorienting to suddenly understand things he'd never learned. He could read Vorthani script as easily as English now. He understood their technology on an instinctive level. He even caught himself thinking in their language sometimes. But the knowledge hadn't changed who he was at his core. He was still the same person who'd crawled through maintenance shafts and sent money home to his mom every month. And that person knew exactly what he wanted to say to this room full of politicians and nobles. Tyler stood up, and the room gradually fell silent. All eyes turned to him, some hopeful, some hostile, most just curious. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. I don't want to be your emperor, he said simply. I'm not going to claim the Vorthani throne or try to rebuild the old empire or rule over anyone. That's not who I am, and honestly, it's not what any of you need. The room erupted in noise. Some representatives looked relieved, others angry, and a few seemed genuinely confused. Lord Kratar, attending via hologram after being banned from physically entering the station, actually laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. Then you are a fool and a coward, Kratar said, his voice dripping with contempt. Unworthy of the blood you carry. You could have claimed power over thousands of worlds, and instead you choose to remain a common laborer. Pathetic. Tyler ignored him and kept talking. But I can't ignore what the Empress showed me. The Devourers are real. Veldar has been researching the old records, and he's found references to them in databases from dozens of extinct civilizations. Every single species that encountered these things went silent within a generation. Their worlds went dark. No survivors, no ruins, nothing left at all. He activated the holographic display at the center of the table, bringing up the data Veldar had compiled over the last few days. Ancient star charts showed regions of space that had once been filled with thriving civilizations. Now those same regions were just empty voids. Recordings played of distress calls that ended abruptly. Astronomical data showed entire star systems that had simply vanished from sensors. This isn't just a Vorthani problem, Tyler continued. It's not a human problem or a Krell problem or any single species problem. If the Devourers come back and the Empress believed they would, then every living thing in this galaxy is at risk. We're all in danger together. A Jalith representative raised one of her 4 arms. What exactly are you proposing, Tyler? If you will not lead, then what will you do with the power you have inherited? Tyler pulled up another display, this one showing an organizational chart he'd been working on with Veldar's help. The Empress left me access to hidden technology caches scattered across the galaxy. Advanced weapons, ships, and knowledge that could give any single group enormous power. But I'm not going to hoard it or use it to conquer anyone. Instead, I want to create something new. Not an empire, but an alliance. A coalition of species working together. He pointed to the chart. Any civilization that wants to join gets access to the Empress's technology. But there are conditions. First, it can only be used for defense, not conquest. Second, every member has to share their own knowledge and resources with the others. No secrets, no holding back. We all benefit together or we don't participate at all. Third, decisions get made by consensus, not by one ruler giving orders. Everyone gets a voice. The room exploded into argument. Some representatives immediately saw the value in what Tyler was proposing. The idea of accessing ancient Vorthani technology was incredibly appealing, especially for smaller civilizations that struggled to defend themselves. But others were suspicious, convinced there must be some hidden agenda or trick. The Vorthani nobles were particularly divided. The younger generation seemed more open to the idea of cooperation with other species. They'd grown up in a galaxy where the Vorthani were just one civilization among many, not the dominant empire their ancestors had ruled. But the older nobles like Kratar were outraged. The thought of sharing their ancestral technology with species they considered inferior went against everything their culture had taught them. Then Veldar entered the chamber, moving slowly because of his injured shoulder. The old historian's presence commanded respect even from those who disagreed with him. He walked to stand beside Tyler, and when he spoke, his voice carried weight. The Empress did not choose a pure Vorthani heir by accident, Veldar said. She had thousands of years to plan, to consider every option, to design exactly what she wanted. And she chose to create a bridge between species. She chose someone who would have Vorthani knowledge but human values. Someone who would see cooperation as strength rather than weakness. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his fellow Vorthani. For 3,000 years we have fought amongst ourselves. We have squabbled over titles and territory while the galaxy moved forward without us. We were once the greatest civilization in known space not because of our weapons, but because of what we built and created. Perhaps it is time we remembered that lesson. Slowly voices began to shift. A representative from the human colonies on the Outer Rim spoke in favor of the alliance. The Jalith Confederation offered cautious support. One of the younger Vorthani nobles, a woman named Sorel who led House Theron, stood and publicly declared her house's willingness to participate in Tyler's proposed coalition. It took hours of negotiation, compromise, and heated debate. Not everyone agreed. Kratar and several other traditional houses refused to have anything to do with what they called the Mongrels Alliance. Some species remained skeptical, wanting to see proof that the technology caches actually existed before committing. But slowly, piece by piece, a framework began to emerge. They called it the Sentinel Alliance. Its purpose was to prepare for the Devourer threat and promote cooperation between species. Tyler was named coordinator, but with strictly limited authority. He could grant access to the Empress's technology and help mediate disputes between members, but he couldn't give orders or force anyone to do anything they didn't want to do. It was messy and imperfect and would probably be complicated to manage, but it was a start. As the meeting finally ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Commander Corvier approached Tyler with something that might have been a smile on her alien features. "You handled that well," she said. "You took a situation that could have sparked a war and turned it into an opportunity for cooperation. That takes wisdom." Tyler shrugged, feeling exhausted. "I just did what made sense. The Empress gave me tools to help people, not to control them. Using them the right way seemed like the obvious choice." That night, Tyler returned to the tomb one last time. The chamber would be sealed again soon, preserved as a historical site. He stood before the crystal container where the Empress's hologram had appeared, looking at his reflection in its surface. He looked the same as always, just a regular guy in work clothes. But everything had changed. "I hope I'm doing this right," Tyler said quietly, talking to the memory of an Empress who'd been dead for 3,000 years. "I'm just a maintenance guy who sneezed at the wrong time. I don't know if I'm the heir you were hoping for." The tomb systems activated one final time. The Empress's hologram appeared, but this message was different, shorter and more personal than before. "You are exactly what I hoped for, Tyler," Shalvora said, smiling warmly. "Not a conqueror seeking glory, but someone willing to fix what's broken. Not a warrior hungry for power, but a protector accepting responsibility. The blood means nothing without the heart to use it wisely." You proved yourself worthy not by claiming power, but by choosing to serve others instead of ruling them. The hologram's expression grew serious. My empire fell because we forgot that strength comes from working together, not standing alone. Do not let this galaxy make the same mistake. Be human. Be Vorthani. Be both or be neither. Just be true to yourself. That is all I ever wanted. The message faded and the tomb went dark. Tyler stood in silence for a moment, then turned and walked back toward the upper levels of the station. He had work to do. The Sentinel Alliance needed to be organized. The Empress's technology caches needed to be located. And somewhere out there in the darkness of space, the Devourers were beginning to stir. Tyler pulled out his communicator and sent a message to his mom and brother back on Earth. He kept it simple, not mentioning empresses or genetic legacies or galactic threats. Just that he was okay, work was getting more interesting, and he'd be sending money home as usual. That conversation about everything else would have to wait until he could explain it in person. As he walked through the corridors of Terminus 7, Tyler noticed that people treated him differently now. Aliens who'd barely glanced at him a week ago now nodded respectfully as he passed. Some stopped to thank him or express support for the Alliance. It felt weird and uncomfortable, but also kind of affirming in a strange way. Tyler didn't feel like a chosen one or a destined hero. He felt like someone who'd stumbled into an impossible situation and decided to make the best of it. He had ancient knowledge in his head and access to incredible technology, but he was still himself where it mattered most. Still the kid who'd learned to fix things because his family couldn't afford to pay someone else. Still stubborn enough to keep trying even when things seemed hopeless. And maybe that combination was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not a warrior or a conqueror, but a mechanic who knew how to fix broken things and refused to give up until the job was done. The end.